Welcome to the debate. You know, when you type a command into a computer terminal and hit enter, invisible circuits, they instantly reorganize to execute that exact command. It's instantaneous.
Right, it's a structural change.
Exactly. But we don't usually think of human thought that way, right? We treat our thoughts as, I don't know, fleeting, abstract clouds.
Yeah, just sort of ephemeral.
Right. But what if your intention is actually that keystroke, and your central nervous system is the hardware reorganizing to run a specific line of code?
It's a fascinating image. I mean, the idea that we are walking around with an entire latent library of these if-then subroutines, just waiting for the enter key to be pressed.
Which brings us to the core premise of today's focus, the intention code model, or NIKOM, proposed in Murat Çinici's theoretical paper. NIKOM argues our minds are fundamentally built on these conditional programs. So the core question is, does Çinici give us a genuine breakthrough in how intention actually shapes the body, or is this just, well, a really elegant repackaging of cognitive therapies we already use every day?
I mean, I lean heavily toward the latter. Defining the mind as a library of conditional codes gives us a very clean vocabulary, sure, but I find it theoretically redundant.
Redundant how?
Well, it takes established frameworks, like Peter Gallwitzer's implementation intentions, which is essentially just the psychological planning of if X happens, I will do Y. And it just layers unnecessary computational metaphors over them. And crucially, it does this without providing primary empirical data.
See, I read it quite differently. I see it as a paradigm shift, especially for advanced professionals, clinicians and researchers. NIKOM moves beyond just looking at isolated traits or beliefs.
Okay, but how does it move beyond them?
By establishing a strict three-layer architecture for every single mental code. So you have a cognitive expectancy, an emotional tone, and a visceral somatic signature. When an intention activates a dormant code, it triggers what the paper calls alignment.
Right, the probabilistic reorganization.
Yes. It's arguing that intention isn't just a passing thought. It is an active operator that selects conditional software and drives measurable physical changes in the body.
But let's look at how that actually plays out in reality, because this is where the overlap with existing theories becomes really obvious to me.
Well, let's bring it down to a practical daily life example from the text, the public speaking threat code.
Sure, a classic stressor.
Right. So a person steps up to a podium. They run the code. If I speak in public, then I will be humiliated. Now, NIKOM doesn't just say they feel nervous. It shows how this abstract fear bridges into physical reality.
By mapping it to the brain.
Exactly. It triggers the locus coeruleus, which is essentially the brain's spotlight, to hyper-focus your attention only on negative cues, like someone yawning in the front row. Then it triggers the amygdala, your alarm system, which flips the switch on your HPA axis.
Releasing the cortisol.
Releasing the cortisol, yes. Acting like a chemical pump. And then it triggers the anterior insula to generate actual physical chest tightness.
Wait, let's not gloss over that, though. How does an invisible, abstract fear literally flip a physical switch in the brain? We already know public speaking causes a fast heart rate, and existing theories already explain the how perfectly well.
You mean predictive processing?
Yeah, specifically Carl Friston's predictive processing theory. It argues the brain is a prediction engine. It constantly guesses what's going to happen and tweaks the body to match those predictions to minimize surprise.
Right, minimizing prediction error.
Exactly. If your brain expects humiliation, it preemptively revs up the stress engines. So my question is, does calling this alignment actually add mechanistic value, or is it just relabeling the brain's basic prediction machinery?
I think it adds immense value because it explains the mechanism of the operator. Think of NIKOM, not like a piece of software, but like a physical loom weaving a tapestry.
A loom?
Yeah. Predictive processing tells us the pattern being woven. Neurobiology tells us about the physical threads themselves. But NIKOM explains how the abstract intention actually acts as the lever, dropping those physical threads, attention, memory, the autonomic nervous system, into a synchronized probabilistic pattern. It bridges the immaterial thought and the biological reaction.
I see the metaphor, but if we are running on this hidden code, and we understand how the loom works, how do we actually hack it? Because the paper talks about recoding, and this is where I get incredibly skeptical about how novel this framework is.
Well, the text gives us a very specific blueprint for reprogramming our mental software. You can use cognitive behavioral restructuring to change the belief itself.
Which is standard CBT.
Yes, and you can use mindfulness-based meta-awareness to observe your own patterns. But the absolute crux of NIKOM is somatic layer engagement.
Meaning you have to engage the body?
Precisely. You can't just think your way out of a physiological code. You have to feel your way out. NIKOM explicitly hypothesizes that engaging the body through interoceptive exposure, literally exposing yourself to those internal physical sensations and regulating your breath, produces vastly more durable recoding than just talking it out.
But, I mean, if you're listening to this and you've been to modern therapy, you know what it feels like to logically know you shouldn't be anxious while your body is still panicking. Clinicians already address this.
But do they have a unified architectural framework for it?
Well, standard schema therapy identifies old, maladaptive survival habits, say, severe perfectionism stemming from highly critical parents. It reframes them as outdated protective programs. We already do this in practice. Adding a somatic layer is a great hypothesis for why some therapies stick better than others, but we are being asked to adopt a meta-theory without the clinical trials to back up that this specific three-layer recoding is superior.
The empirical data is exactly what the paper sets up as the next frontier. It specifically proposes concrete experimental paradigms, like the somatic layer recoding trial. But clinical settings have limits.
What do you mean by limits?
I mean, you can't always just breathe your way out of deeply ingrained existential fears. And that is exactly why NIKOM looks outside the clinic to where humans have been doing this for millennia, which is religious rituals.
Okay, this is definitely where the paper takes its biggest and, in my view, most speculative leap.
I actually think it's a brilliant synthesis. NIKOM decodes rituals like Friday congregational prayer or a baptism as structured activation sequences.
So religion is just code activation.
Basically, yeah. These aren't just cultural habits. They use synchronized movement, authoritative speech, and distinct sensory environments to literally load and stabilize powerful codes into the nervous system.
Right, the attachment to God metacode.
Exactly. If I face difficulty, then I can turn to a merciful source. NIKOM proposes that this specific metacode systematically downregulates threat codes across the board and alters stress hormone profiles. It actually gives us a biological mechanism for the transformative effect of faith.
But look at what is lost in translation here. Reducing the profound, meaning-making traditions of Buddhism, Islam, or Christianity to robotic if-then subroutines. I mean, it risks flattening the entire human spiritual experience.
Does it flatten it, or does it explain the mechanics of it?
It flattens it. Furthermore, the text differentiates between sincere intention, orienting one's life toward God, and ostentation, praying just to be seen as pious by your neighbors.
Right, which is a crucial distinction.
It is. But how does a psychophysiological model reliably measure the moral quality of an intention? You can measure cortisol, sure. You can measure brainwaves. But parsing the moral nuance of a spiritual intention empirically is a monumental challenge.
I'd argue NIKOM doesn't flatten the spiritual experience at all. It validates its physiological reality. It respects the subjective depth by predicting that sincere intention and ostentation run entirely different codes.
Even with the exact same physical movements?
Exactly. They produce completely different biological alignments, even if the physical motions of the prayer are identical. It argues that intention isn't just a subjective feeling. It has an objective, measurable biological signature.
Which remains an intriguing conceptual synthesis. NIKOM beautifully connects the dots between intention, expectation, and bodily response. I'll give you that. But it still leans heavily on established theories from Friston's predictive processing to cognitive behavioral therapy, without yet offering the direct empirical data required to prove these unique biological signatures actually exist.
Well, for me, NIKOM is a necessary, unifying architecture. It finally integrates intention, bodily alignment, and complex cultural phenomena into a cohesive loop of human agency. It gives us a framework where intention isn't just a ghost in the machine. It actually drives the machine.
We definitely have a vital point of convergence on what comes next, though.
The proposed code inventory and targeted experimental paradigms, like the multi-system alignment test, are exactly what psychology needs to push forward.
Absolutely.
Understanding the deep connection between conditional expectations and bodily reality is paramount, regardless of the metaphor we end up using to describe it.
The necessity of rigorous testing is clear, and it leaves us with something really profound to consider. If our minds really are running on rewritable software, if every intention is a keystroke compiling a physical reality in our bodies, then the most important question isn't just what codes we are currently running. It's how we might finally become the programmers of our own minds.